We are live. Hello, 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 everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are talking about what buyers and sellers should know prior to signing a contract. So, you find this great property or you're selling your great property to somebody. What are some key things that you should know prior to executing that contract? So, today I brought one of our real estate attorneys, Sue Berman, here. I'm going to let her introduce herself in just a minute. But for those of you that don't know me, my name is Sabrina Beer. I'm the Director of Digital Media and Education here at Proper Title, your local Chicagoland, Northwest Indiana title agency and national commercial title agent. Sue, thank you for being here this morning. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, Sabrina. Thank you for having me. My name is Sue Berman, and I'm a real estate attorney, and I handle closings throughout the Chicagoland area. And I'm a very proud agent of Proper Title with my Proper Title coffee mug. And Proper Title has been very helpful to me in closing some of these deals and also kind of behind the scenes to help me with underwriting questions. So very happy to be here with Sabrina and explore this topic.
Thank you, Sue. You know, it's funny. One of these we should do would be about underwriting questions because I don't think a lot of people really understand what happens behind the scene from when you go to contract to closing. So that's a whole nother thing. But today we are talking way before that. So let's talk a little bit about, I'm a buyer. It's such a competitive market that we are so quick to. I'm actually a buyer currently in this market, so I know I've lost out on a couple multiple offer deals, and we're so quick to put our offer in that I think sometimes people don't really understand all the things that go into it. And so let's kind of talk first about contingencies. So within the contract, if there's a couple of different contingencies, specifically a mortgage contingency that people are kind of waiving because they are for sure they're going to get a mortgage. So let me waive this. But what does that actually mean?
When you waive a mortgage contingency, as I tell people very simply, you're closing rain or shine. If you get a mortgage, that's great. If you don't get a mortgage, you need to show up at the closing table with funds, and the seller will be entitled to put you in default and take your earnest money and maybe pursue other remedies if you don't close. In some of the standard contracts we use today, if you're making a cash offer and you want to take that risk, take that leap, there are two other options. There's another option. You can put in mortgage optional, which means it's still a contingency, but you can get a mortgage. If you check the box on that particular contract, no financing, no mortgage allowed. I don't care what you do, that seller is not going to allow you to you have to put the mortgage on post-closing, which is another step. But
Right.
It
So
is.
you have to have the cash. You have to have the actual cash to come to the closing and buy the property.
Cash, cash, cash. And that means you have to go into your savings account, your investment account, whatever you have, you need to make sure that money is going to be there. If you're expecting a bonus at the end of the year, you better make sure you're going to get that bonus. But
I tell people, don't spend money you don't have yet.
Right. Rain, I said rain or shine. There's no other phrase. You're closing, baby.
You mentioned something that I want to address as well, which is earnest money. I think a lot of buyers don't understand, one, what earnest money is, but two is the monies that they are putting up front when they purchase property prior to ever closing that they need to have liquidated.
So I've seen a lot in this market of people putting up 5%.
Of the purchase price.
Of the purchase price. Sometimes it used to be 10%. There still are a few 10%. Yeah. It can go down to anywhere from $1,000 to $25,000 or $30,000 before you start getting into percentages. The risk for the buyer is if they don't get a mortgage, they're going to lose their earnest money. The other risk for the buyer is even if they terminate the contract, if the seller perceives that maybe you're not rightfully terminating the contract, or you go through on the inspection and you break a drawer or you break some glass or something is broken, the seller may say, well, I'll give you your earnest money back, but I'm going to deduct the cost of the repair. So just because it's in escrow, typically that fund is held by a realty company, and you need signatures of both parties, buyer and seller. Even if you're 100%, you think you're entitled to it, you don't want to have to fight for it back.
Yeah, the earnest money part is interesting too, because in addition to that 5 or 10% of the purchase price that you said, they also have to tend to put down $1,000 with the offer, right? Or as soon as the offer gets accepted, either or, however it's written, which people are like, well, why? Why do I need to give that $1,000 or $5,000, whatever that number is, right?
So that initial earnest money, be it $1,000, $5,000, in contract law, you need consideration. Both parties have to come to the table, agree, and give up something or promise something. In a real estate contract, the seller is promising to sell you your home. If you don't have any earnest money, you have nothing at risk. The seller needs something to show that you're really serious, you're going to go through with this. And by putting up $1,000, $5,000, whatever the initial earnest money is, you're legally obligating yourself. You're giving up something. So it's a show. We say, there are lots of phrases, a show of good faith, that
Yeah.
you've got risk, that you've got risk in the game, that you're willing to play the game.
Yeah. The other thing that I think is really interesting is how many times people sign a contract or submit an offer with dates on the contract when they're not even, like, a closing date, and they're not even in town. They're just, oh my God, my realtor told me 45 days or 30 days or whatever the case is. And they never even like check their calendar. And then they just feel like, oh, well, I put this date, I can just change the date.
So one of the first things I do when I get a contract is I check all these dates and I send a memo out to the client. These are the dates. I mark my calendar too, because I want to make sure I don't have a conflict. You'd be surprised at how many contracts I get that have a closing date of a Saturday, Sunday, or holiday or business holiday.
Yes.
So I check my calendar. I send my client a list of dates. These are the dates that you need to be aware of. What is your vacation schedule? Do you have a family event going on that weekend? It's much easier to address it early on. If
Yeah.
you're buying a place and the seller's got their stuff on a truck and then you want to change it to the last minute, that doesn't happen. Same with the mortgage contingency, even more important. In these days, I'm closing contracts in 3 weeks, 4 weeks with a mortgage contingency. I'm closing cash deals in 2 weeks. If you have a mortgage contingency and you're closing in 3 or 4 weeks, you have 5 business days before closing. It's either 45 days or 5 business days, the earliest to occur. So that means if you're closing in 3 weeks, you have a 2-week mortgage contingency. Not only the buyer, get on the phone with the lender. Can the lender meet that deadline?
That's right.
You're buying a condo. Can the HOA, this flip it around for the seller, can the HOA produce the documents, give you the right of first offer, or waive the first offer, or tell you there's no right of first refusal? So you're right. Everybody signs deadlines and everybody wants to get it done, blah, 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 blah. But put pen to paper and look at a calendar. I don't care if you have a real paper calendar or a e-calendar. Look at those dates. If you have a conflict, if you're not in town, we might be able to work around that if you're available.
Right.
Are you in a different time zone? Are you 13 hours ahead? That may not work.
Yeah, it's funny too when you said, with the mortgage company, with the mortgage, that you're getting, to make sure that they can close in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, whatever the number is. But also equally as important, are you going to have your stuff together as the buyer, right? Because they're going to need all this information from you. If it takes you 2 or 3 weeks to get it to them, then there goes that deadline, right? So you as the buyer also have to be well aware. Like, if you have a busy week coming up, you're not going to be able to do all of these things that they need. So prepare for that.
Right. And if your profession is such that if you're a school teacher or a physician or somebody who has appointments, no flexibility during the day, I need to know that, because maybe we'll schedule a closing at, have somebody come in at 8:30 in the morning, or maybe we'll close at 3:30 in the afternoon. But these are all important. Calendar is becoming so much more important now with everybody's tight time frames.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned HOAs, so I do want to talk about that a little bit, especially when I think about the city of Chicago, the number of condos that are here or townhouse developments. And you deal so much with these condo associations or homeowners associations. And I think a lot of times people don't really understand that there are rules and there are things associated with an HOA that they might not even think of as a buyer. And
So,
can you, yeah,
yeah, sorry. In Illinois, we have the Condo Property Act disclosure. It also applies in some respects to co-ops and townhomes and general homeowners community associations, they call them. So on the buyer side, again, one more time, buyer beware. You're entitled to review the documents. You're entitled to the financial information. You can ask for minutes. You can poke around and, is there a reserve study? On the seller side, you have to produce those items. Well, guess what? Seller, don't ever give things out of your own file. Get them from the HOA. And the time concerns are always going to be there. If you have a small HOA, the seller may need more time to gather things. If you have a larger HOA, they hire a third party to produce these documents. You've got to apply for them, you've got to pay for them, and they're not always quick, and they charge more to have it delivered earlier. So whatever HOA, it takes time. And some buyers are lucky, they will get some documents delivered to them with the contract. I personally look behind the scenes there. I want to see the official documents come from the HOA. So it is a time sensitive matter. It is review sensitive. If you are a buyer and you get those documents and it's pages and pages and pages and pages, somebody has to go through them. I will go through them for certain things, but I can't determine whether or not the rules are going to apply, how they
right.
apply to you. If it
Well,
says,
Sue, let me interrupt you really quick, right? Because there's so many things with the rules. There's could be rental restrictions, there could be pets, there could be smoking. Like I don't want to live next to a smoker, but I'm just saying if you're a smoker, that's going to be important for you because there's smoke-free buildings. It could be whether or not if you're in a house, if you can change your front door to be orange, right? Like if these are things that are important to you, you as the buyer have to actually look for those things, or at least make your realtor and your attorney aware of that those things are important to you.
right. And again, it's very time sensitive. There are a lot of documents to go through, or hopefully there are a lot of documents to go through. And the buyer, I don't know what's on the buyer's mind. They may say, I'm going to live here for a year, then I'm going to move. I will want to rent it out. Or I'm getting married. My fiance has 2 dogs. Can we have 2 dogs?
Right.
And as you said, there are a lot of restrictions. Parking is another part of the HOA. Is parking from the HOA? Is it a designated parking space, or is it just park wherever? We'll make sure you have a space.
Well,
So
in some single family HOAs, your guests can't park on the street.
right, and
So
that's why it's a community association rule.
yeah. Mm. Sorry. Okay, so because of timing, I want to switch over from the buyer to the seller because equally how fast everything is moving for the buyer in a lot of markets, in a lot of geographical markets, these sellers are also, it's very quick. The time on the market is a week or two, getting a ton of showings now, y'all. Not for everybody. Some people are on the market a lot longer than that. But there's quite a few things that you should do. I personally think prior to even listing the property, and nevertheless prior to the contract, right? And so like one of those things I really feel kind of strongly about is really understanding like what you need to disclose, because the realtor isn't going to know if the seller doesn't tell them, but the buyers are asking questions during the showings and everything. So what, just as a broad thing, what should a seller disclose, even if it's not in one of these disclosure documents?
Well,
Is there anything?
just just from the basics, there are three main disclosure documents: the real property disclosure, lead-based paint, and radon. So the real property disclosure, just for a little background, has, I don't know, 25 or 30 questions. Is this going on? Is that going on? Is that going on? Those are self-explanatory. I'm the attorney, you got the broker. We are not allowed to fill out those forms. If you have questions, we can help you answer. I can't fill out those forms for people. I don't know what's going on. Things outside of the real property disclosure, I think some of those are handled case by case. For example, if 1 year ago, if you had a major flood in your house, technically you don't have to disclose that because it's not a current condition. The real property disclosure mainly deals with current property disclosures. If you had something like that, I think we need to have a little talk and figure out, because if you had a major flood a year ago, that may fall under the disclosure. The other thing is radon. If you have a current radon mitigation system, which I've been running into more and more and more, then you probably should disclose you have a current radon system. Most sellers will check no because they don't have radon.
Yeah.
Cool. That's great.
Yeah.
But you have the system in there, so you may have to disclose it. The other things that comes up more than I care to think about is once a property's under contract and something happens, those are more the questions I get. This happened. Do I have to disclose it?
Yeah.
The other thing in Illinois, it's kind of related. We are not obligated as sellers to disclose prior insurance claims. Buyers ought to be asking for the history of prior insurance claims. They don't always. As a seller, you don't have to disclose it, but have that information at your fingertips, because if a buyer asks about it, or again, if you had a flood settlement, you may need to disclose that.
Yeah. Yeah, the insurance claims is really interesting. God bless you. The insurance claims is really interesting, Sue, because you're right. Like I mean, I've been a part of many, many, many transactions, and a lot of them not ask one thing about, I know a lot of times in the attorney review letter, they'll ask, but they don't really, you don't really get a lot of information on that unless you ask for it. The other thing is the same kind of, before you go and accept this offer, like check your calendar, right? Like we don't need to discuss it all over again, but those deadlines that we were just talking about are equally as important for the seller as they are the buyer, right?
Right. Let me go back to one thing about insurance
Yeah,
report. As a
please.
buyer, you can have your insurance agent run a CLUE report, comprehensive loss underwriting exchange, and they can pull up prior insurance claims. Not every insurance company will do that. So there is something the buyer can do. On the seller dates, what we have to keep in mind in Illinois, the custom and practices for the buyer's side to prepare the contract and to give it to the seller. So sometimes there are items in the contract that maybe the seller, I didn't know that, or they're asking for that, or does that date work for me? And again, as a seller, you have to come back and say, this date works for me, this date doesn't work for me. If you have if you're buying another property, do you want to coordinate it so they close on the same day? Or it's nice if you can leave a gap, you sell and then you buy, or you buy first, so you're not closing it on the same day. But same for the mortgage contingency. If you're buying another place and you need to know if your buyer has a mortgage contingency, when does that date expire? And then if the buyer asked you for an extension, what do you do? So seller has the same responsibility to look at a calendar, as do I. Are you agreeing to close on a Saturday? You can't close on a Saturday.
Yeah.
The banks aren't open. We go by the bank's holiday schedule.
Right. And it's all like a domino effect, right? The buyer's probably selling a place, buying a place, the seller's probably selling a place, buying. So all those dates are very, very important. And, one of the crazy things is we have only like scratched the surface in this conversation. I have like 20 more things I can ask you about. But Joe, this is exactly why you need a real estate attorney for your real estate transactions, because there are so many things that even if somebody is an attorney that they're not thinking about because they're not doing real estate transactions all day, every day. So it's like, just like I'm just tapping into Sue's brain, she's able to run off all these things that we need to check if you're selling or you're buying. So please, if you're doing a real estate transaction, please use a real estate attorney. Okay. Let me just talk about one more thing before we jump out of here, which is, I think, is super important for sellers, is if you are accepting an offer from a buyer, whether it's cash or a loan, to make sure that you know that they're good for that money, right? Like, have some proof, whether it's a pre-approval letter, pre-qualification letter, bank statements, whatever it is, right?
So so you go two different avenues here. If you accept a contract with financing, typically you're going to get a mortgage pre-approval letter. If you accept a cash offer, typically you're getting proof of funds. A pre-qualification letter is issued by a bank or a lender, and it'll maybe say it's good for this amount of time. It's good for purchase up to 500, 800,000. And it'll have a few, it's pretty basic. It'll say, yeah, this person's qualified. A pre-approval is not a loan commitment. So sellers always get very excited when they see them, but I tell them it's a piece of paper. They still have to go through underwriting. You still have to go through the appraisal. And if you're a buyer, have that lined up. It doesn't mean that's the lender you have to go with. Right. But again, going back to something you said, Sabrina, you better have your finances lined up before you get in this process. If you're paying cash, the proof of funds letter is a little tricky, because a lot of people deliver a proof of funds letter and half the sellers, sorry to say, don't look at it. Here's what I want to see on a proof of funds letter: a current date. I don't want to see one from January. I want to see one now, April 30th. I mean, you got to give somebody 30 days. I do not ever want to see the account number on it. Please, before you send that, please redact the account information. I want to see of course, the dollar amount that you're buying, and I want to see a name on it. If you're buying, Sabrina, if you're buying it and the proof of funds letter comes from somebody in your family or a friend who's offered to loan you the money, that doesn't work. The names have to be the same. If it's in a trust, maybe go behind the scenes if it's for the benefit of blah, 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 blah. The other thing that you don't know from a proof of funds letter, and I have to explain this to seller, they could have $1 million in the bank. Cool. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Is that money in an IRA that you can't touch it? Is it tied up in some equity asset that you can't sell it? Does it take 30 days? Is it in a fund, or is it liquid? So those are questions you may want to ask that are not obvious, but a proof of funds letter and a pre-approval, they're more than a piece of paper. They have to be reviewed. And I have been on both sides of people saying, no, this is not good. Or, again, a seller saying, I've had people deliver a proof of funds letter from their parents, but the buyers of the house, they have nothing. So what am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah, y'all, there are so many things, and it is dependent upon your deal, your contract, your everything. Sue's contact information is here, whether you're watching on Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube or whatever. It's down in the comments as well. But feel free to give her and her firm a call so that you can get best representation, whether you're a buyer or a seller, because there are so many things to think of when you are making one of the biggest transactions of your entire life, if not the biggest transaction of your entire life. So, Sue, thank you. I can't believe the time has gone by so fast, but I feel like, again, we just scratched the surface on all these things we could talk about, but thank you for letting me tap into your brain.
Thank you. And Sabrina, what you've done for me is you made me make like a really cool little checklist of, which I always go through, but it's really nice to have the thought process of somebody else asking me, because it makes me think about all these details. And I always appreciate helping you, learning something from you, and Proper Title has been great. So
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Sue. That's so sweet. Thank you. And I just before we go, I just really quick would like to manifest this thing. You had said earlier that if I had a proof of funds and I had $1 million in the bank, like so, I'm just putting that out into the world.
I don't have $1 million in the bank, so I'm not saying that because I have it.
I'm just putting it in the world for my bank account.
Yeah.
Sue, thank you. It's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for being on the show this week. And
Thank you.
soon. Bye, everybody. Be kind
All
to
right.
each other.
Have a good week. Bye. Thank you.